Hey there, Games Apprentice back with another EVERCADE video, and this week I'm doing part 2 of my Capcom Collection rankings. There are 9 games left. Which one is going to be the best? Let's find out. So last week I covered games 18 to 10. If you've not checked that out already, you can check that out here. Here are the remaining games on this excellent collection, ranked from 9 to 1. I'd played a bit of Captain Commando previously, as it was one of the games on Capcom's Beat 'em Up bundle. If you're a fan of games like Streets of Rage, then this is definitely going to be right up your street. No pun intended. It looks great and has some excellent animations, such as the awesome 16-bit being on fire effect. You've got 4 characters to choose from, each with their own moveset. You can jump, dash, attack, and pick up interesting weapons or commandeer things like a big mech suit. The weapons and the setting are probably the main thing that makes this one stand out from the others within this genre. Your moveset do feel a bit limited, and again the system's inability to provide multiplayer do let the game down a bit, but it's definitely a brawler worth playing. The only remaining game on this collection that I'd never heard of. Set in a distant future, you control a flying super soldier hell-bent fighting the evil gods that have been laying waste to Earth. It's an arcade game that got ported to multiple home consoles, but this is the original arcade version. The game plays like a standard side-scrolling shooter. You can fly around the screen, shooting enemies and picking up power-ups. Where it stands out, however, is the aiming. You can rotate clockwise or anti-clockwise, allowing you to shoot in a full 360 degrees of motion. The weapons and art style look pretty cool, and it does a good job of making you feel like a super soldier. For an arcade shooter, it's got reasonable completion time of about 45 minutes, with score chasing or attempting to use less credits, adding a bit more longevity onto that. It's a pretty fun shooter that's less oversaturated than the rest of the games on here, so could be a nice gem for some. It is slightly let down by the EVERCADE EXP's lack of 2-player option. The best brawler on this collection is undoubtedly Final Fight, which is hardly surprising as it's one of the best brawlers ever. Many a wrong person has even claimed it's better than Streets of Rage, but to be honest that beats it with the soundtrack alone. Whichever your preference though, Final Fight is a solid brawler that is visually brilliant. Its big sprites, detail of characters and overall speed make it alluring, and it's a joy to play. It's easy to see why this would have attracted many a punter on the arcade machine. Again, it's another one let down by the lack of a 2-player mode, which is why it's not higher up the list. But you certainly can't have a Capcom Arcade collection without a Final Fight. If you're looking for a game with substance and longevity on this collection, then look no further than Breath of Fire, which will keep you occupied for around 30 hours. Breath of Fire is a 16-bit role-playing game with a turn-based battle system. It was basically Capcom's answer to Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy. Back on the Super Nintendo, it had a lot of competition for Best JRPG, and wasn't remotely in the running due to the high standards set by other games in that genre at the time. On the EVERCADE though, good JRPGs are very hard to come by, so this one sits right up there with Pico's Brave Battle Saga. You're basically trying to save your kingdom from the Dark Dragons by acquiring the keys to be able to unlock some power before they do. Nothing about it really stands out as spectacular. It's very much a sort of paint by numbers how to make a JRPG. The combat, story, dialogue and art style are all fine without being anything particularly special. Random encounters are probably a bit too frequent, and the early game difficulty curve is tough, constantly expecting you to do lots of healing in battles and grinding outside of it. Still, even a half-decent JRPG is better than a lot of games, and it's a genre very much lacking on the EVERCADE. If you've never played it before, it's worth checking out. Now this is where things get tricky. If I was doing a top 5 EVERCADE games list, all these 5 would probably take up those spaces. Putting them in order is going to be very specific to my taste, and to be honest, I keep changing the order of these, but this is definitely my finalised ones. Here they are ranked from 5 to 1. The most recent released game on this collection, the sequel to 1942 and 1943, comes the imaginatively named 1944, which came to arcades in the year 2000, and it absolutely shows in the way it plays. It's a modern shooter with a killer soundtrack that's full of bullet hell and weapon upgrades. As well as the ability to fire your primary weapon, you also have a charge attack. This requires a cooldown but unleashes a devastating blow. Sometimes there can be a bit too much going on the screen, but that's pretty much how bullet hells work. You just have to focus your eyes on your ship and its surroundings rather than the screen as a whole. Tons of fun. The arcade version had a 2-player option, but I imagine that must have been complete chaos, so no marks off for that. This is a great shooter, definitely check it out. Originally, this one was my number 1 game on the list, but the more I played the games, the further it moved down. First of all, let's address the elephant in the room for this one. You can't play it multiplayer on the EVERCADE. That absolutely sucks for a fighting game, and that is the only reason it was a close fight for the top 5, because if it was multiplayer, it would have easily been a flawless victory for Street Fighter, and it would have been number 1 by miles. However, even as a single player game, Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting is a fantastic beat 'em up. It's as good now as it ever was. It looks great graphically, it's so fast and fluid, especially compared to some of the console ports. The soundtrack is iconic, as are the sound effects. There's 12 characters to master playing and 12 characters to master playing against, giving you a lot of different combinations of matchups, with only Ryu and Ken playing similar. With Street Fighter 6 looming, there's never been a better time to go back to the beginning. Don't go back to Street Fighter 1. And seeing how it became such a popular franchise. Being an arcade port, there's a lack of modes, and there's also so many times you can fight the AI without getting a bit bored, which is what ended up putting it in 4th place. Mega Man is a series that got it right from day 1, and the original game still absolutely holds up. In Mega Man, you control the titular character, who can jump and shoot from his arm cannon. As you progress in the game, you'll defeat one of the game's 6 bosses, and when you do, you acquire new upgrades for your suit related to that boss. The levels themselves are generally very short, but the platforming is particularly unforgiving. One of the mechanics that always made the series stand out was the fact that you could choose what levels you want to do in what order, and having particular powers against certain bosses would require much less skill to beat them. It's a great game to be able to play handheld, and its difficulty is made all the more friendlier with the use of save states. Check it out. Just missing out on the top spot is my favourite Mega Man game of all time. This was the first NES game I ever played, and even though it would constantly kick my ass, I absolutely loved it. Mega Man 2 takes everything that the original Mega Man did right and improves upon it. It added a little bit of story, but not too much that it overstays its welcome. It adds 2 more levels, has more interesting power-ups, offers a choice of difficulty level, and has an amazing soundtrack. Even on normal difficulty, which is the lowest difficulty, it's still very challenging, and to this day I've never beaten the final boss. Other than the ridiculously hard, and even so hard with save states, Quickman level, most of the difficulty bits feel fair at least. The music and nostalgia alone keep me happy with this one, but even I can admit that whilst this is my favourite for those reasons, there's a game that should be ranked higher. Now, I'm not exactly a Mega Man expert. I've played 2 to death, and I've played bits of some of the others, but before this review I'd barely touched the Mega Man X series at all. It's certainly better than the NES Mega Man titles, but personally, I've just never quite gelled with this one. Being able to just fire it up and pick whatever level you wanted in Mega Man was an important feature to me. But in Mega Man X, you've got to do a fairly standard action game level before you get to make that decision. And that's just not what I come to the Mega Man series for. But you could argue that level's a good introduction to newcomers of the Mega Man series. Previously I'd switched off before even getting to the end of that section. However, you can't review a game without giving it a fair shot, and I'm thankful I chose to review the Capcom Collection for this game alone. Once past the initial level, it turns back into giving you a normal Mega Man game. Sure, it's missing some of the ridiculously hard platforming bits thanks to a new wall jump feature, but it adds so much more. Boss fights now take skill instead of just spamming the right weapons and hoping their health deteriorates before yours does. You now get cool upgrades beyond just the weapons, which affect even more of how each level is played, and making the level order you choose even more unique experience. If you prefer difficult boss fights over difficult platforming, this is definitely the Mega Man game for you. So there you have it, what an absolute beast of a collection. That's my list, let me know what yours is. Don't forget to like the video, and please click subscribe for more of my reviews, rankings and hidden gems, and I'll catch you next time.